Good Monday morning. Today we're having a developer discussion with Charlie Gerard. She's a software developer, a front-end developer like you and I, but she has this interesting side hobby that she talked about at Nordic.js, which is mind control in JavaScript. So we talk a bit about these brain interfaces that has electrodes that you can read with JavaScript APIs, and we also talk about how working with hardware can make you less afraid of failure, and we also talk a little bit about how, like, the importance of just jumping into things without a purpose and not be too mindful about like having an end goal, because that can be very, very useful when it comes to learning new things. If you're wondering what this space is around me, it's because I'm in Amsterdam at the moment on vacation, and I'm visiting Framer, which were kind enough to lend me their studio to record, so that's where I am. But before we get on with the interview, it is sponsor time. Today's sponsor is Brilliant, a problem-solving website that teaches you how to think like a computer scientist. If you are interested in learning computer science fundamentals, binary trees, quicksort, big O, that kind of stuff, then instead of just passively listening through video courses, Brilliant has these interactive challenges with increasing difficulty, so it feels a little bit like a game. It's very satisfying. Use brilliant.org/FFF when you sign up so that they know that you came from here. Also, if you are one of the first 200 people to use that link, you get 20% off if you get the annual subscription. That very magical link is also in the episode description. That's our sponsor. On with the show. I am your host, MPJ. You are watching Fun Function, and this is a developer discussion with Charlie Gerard.
So what I talk about is mind control in JavaScript. So it's
Okay.
so it's basically using a brain sensor that you can buy online, but in JavaScript. So being able to interact with web pages or devices.
Let me stop you. There are brain sensors that you
Yes,
can buy
there
online.
are. There's actually quite a few, and the price range varies. And that's also what I like. It's like you don't have to invest that much money at first, but of course with the price comes different types of quality. So you can start with something quite cheap just to get started, but then as...
What is cheap?
I think the first one I bought was $150.
What? That's super cheap.
Yes, it is super cheap, but it's not that great. Like when you want to get started, there's like basically 3 different sensors, so it doesn't track that well.
But what can you do with it? What was your first hack?
So what it gets is level of attention and meditation. So you have a few games that you can play and work on your focus. So I think even if it doesn't track a lot of stuff, you can still train yourself to become more focused, and you have that feedback straight away. But I don't know exactly how accurate it is, but if you want to get started with that, it's pretty cheap. And then, of course, it gets a bit higher. The second one that I bought, the one that I'm talking about in my talk, is called the Emotiv Epoch, and it has 14 different sensors around the head, so it's a lot more. And it can track more things. You can have access to what they call performance metrics. So it's your level of focus or boredom or excitement, and you can do things with that. Or you have access to facial expressions. So looking left, right, up, down, blinking, smiling, things like that. So you have access to that. And
That's amazing.
Yeah.
You mentioned 14 different sensors.
Yeah, around
So you put like, that is why you mentioned that you had gel.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why I have gel in my hair.
But how does that work? How do you get it through the hair? Or that's perhaps what the gel is for?
Well, yeah, because you have brain sensors where you don't have to use the gel, but it always works better if you are bald or if you have not that much hair. But usually, you have to move them around so they touch the scalp as much as possible.
How do you position them?
In the device is set up so that it fits, and then you kind of move them around a little bit so it fits okay. You have software that you can download, and it kind of tells you where it should be. It tells you how well it's connected or how well it's tracking, so you can move them around or add more gel and stuff like that.
I love this shit.
Yeah. But you can also have access to some mental comments, so some thoughts that you train.
Okay, like what?
With the Emotiv Epoch, you have a list of thoughts of actions like pushing or pulling or directions like going left or going right, and you train that. And then once you have your data trained, you can then use that in applications. So you can track the live data, and it classifies, oh, is the person thinking about going right, left, and you can just use that in stuff, in whatever you want, really. Yeah.
How did you get into this?
Is this a thing that people do?
I don't. There is actually a growing community in neurotechnology. I think especially because the devices get better and machine learning algorithms are getting a lot more performance, so you can track more things. So people see it as an industry that's going to grow a lot more. But I did not start with that. It wasn't my first thought. I've kind of always been interested in just interactions, and I don't have a background in computer science. I did a boot camp. So
neither do I.
I learned to code in a boot camp, and when I was looking for my first job, I actually started with a leap motion.
Oh yes, I have one of those.
Yeah.
Perhaps you should mention what a leap motion is for the people that don't know.
So the leap motion is a device that you plug to your computer, and it tracks the movement of your hands over it. So it knows if it's the right hand or the left hand. It knows the number of fingers, the orientation, and things like that. And you have access to all that data, and you can build interfaces, or you can interact with other devices. You can move drones with.
It's basically like just a couple of infrared cameras, right? And then they have a machine learning thing on top of that, which gives you like positioning.
Yes, exactly. So I started with that, and then when I kind of got used to it, I was like, well, there has to be other devices as well. So I moved on, and I used a Myo armband. It's an armband, so you wear it on your arm, and it has sensors inside, and it tracks the activity of the muscle in your arm. So you have access to how you rotate your arm, and you also have access to some predefined gestures. Like if you do that, that's called like a wave right or wave left, and you have access to that, and you train it as well a little bit, and you can then apply that to robots or interfaces. And the thing is, you also have access to raw data. So if you don't want to use their predefined gestures, I'm actually working on that now, but you can actually get the data and train your own gestures by doing a bit of machine learning. So that's my way of learning machine learning, being like, but yeah, this is what I like, just trying to not be restrained to the keyboard and see, what else can you do to be able to adapt to you as a person rather than I have to be here in front of my laptop. So, yeah.
Wow, that is that's amazing. But you're here at the JavaScript conference. It's like this doesn't seem like a JavaScripty thing.
It actually is. I mean, a lot of devices that you buy actually have JavaScript frameworks that you can buy for it. So you can run a lot of JavaScript on hardware now. So you can make your own little robots, and you can control them in Node.js, and of course, like the web and interface, you can do it in JavaScript. So you can really control a lot of things just with one language, which is something that I really like. I think it's really amazing, and most of it is open source.
So the things that you have mentioned here, they have JavaScript APIs. Yeah. Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, everybody can do it.
Like a bit more questions about you or your career. Okay. Like how did you get started with software development?
So I have a background in advertising. So I studied in France, and at the time I didn't know I could be a dev. Like I really had no idea. I thought it was for the super smart people. And now I'm like, oh, not at all.
You do seem sort of super smart when you talk about that. But perhaps that is why, but perhaps that's why people believe it. Like one sounds super smart when everyone talks about this.
Well, that's the thing. It's accessible to everybody. And so when I started working in advertising, I was managing a team of developers, and they the load of work that they had to do, it was quite intense, and I wanted to be able to help, but I didn't know how. And learning after work was a bit hard, because when you don't know how to learn, then I had no idea how to go about it. Yeah. So I decided to quit my job and do a bootcamp to learn to be a web developer. And I realized that I loved it. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like you can really have an idea, and you write a bit of code, and it's there, and you made it yourself. And that's really empowering. And it's exciting. And from there, I just kind of like didn't look back. I was like, that's it.
I love that story. I really like hearing stories from people that don't come from the Stanford, Facebook. I don't want to put down that line of progression. It's really cool that we have computer science universities, but computer science didn't come from that.
Yeah.
When Silicon Valley started out, there was no such thing as studying computer science. It was physics majors.
Yeah.
So at last in Berlin and in what's it called, JSConf, there was this talk about that a guy had. He was from forklift driver to JavaScript developer, and he's like love how especially JavaScript seems to just suck people in from different walks of life.
It is really, I think it's the language that's the most accessible for a lot of people, and a lot of people make fun of JavaScript, but I actually love it. I think it's like if you can get more people into coding and being able to, be part of that environment, then that's great. Yeah. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I have this idea that I would like to sit down and really dive into what it is about JavaScript specifically that just makes it such a pliable language for creativity. It just doesn't get in your way.
Yeah.
Yet it still has a pretty good balance of quality, so that you can use it in production grade applications. Yeah. It's not a toy language, but it allows you to get started and just not a lot of
it's true. I don't know what makes it the most creative language as well. I'm not sure, but I think it's amazing. People build amazing things with JavaScript, even in terms of graphics in the browser. I'm like, wow.
I would like to ask you about some failure that you had, so some mistake you made that impacted you negatively and was only your fault. So it was not not the fault of someone else. And the reason why I asked the question is that the channel is watched by a lot of different people, but the persona that I imagine most is a developer 1 year into their first job. And watching other developers from that vantage point, people always talk about their successes and show their awesome brain scanning projects, and they're incredibly impressive. And it comes back to that thing that you talked about, how you feel I didn't even know that I could be a developer because it seems everybody seems so smart and amazing. And that is why I asked the question, because there's a side behind it as well.
I think so. If I just talk about the type of stuff that I do outside of work, when I play with hardware, you fail a lot of times, especially because debugging, it's not like in the browser where you get an error, undefined is not a function or something. With hardware, you just don't know. Sometimes you just didn't plug stuff properly, and it won't tell you. It won't tell you this wire is not connected to the right pin. It just won't work.
It's out there in the reality.
Yeah, and there's that's why what I'm talking about now at conferences, it actually, as I said, it took me 3 years because I did not know how to start, and there's a lot of times where I put it on the side because I was like, I can't do this. I just don't know how to get there, and I've had to try again. And there's a lot of projects with Arduino where I just realized a month later that I was doing the wrong thing, and all of a sudden I was just like, oh, I should have known that. And I think when you put your head into something way too much, you just don't realize that you're going the wrong way. But otherwise, at work, I think recently, but it wasn't code related, but I did something that was, we're using Google Drive as an internal platform to share knowledge and stuff like that. And I had to edit, it was really simple. I had to edit a page because we have internal talks about front end, and I had to add one of the talks that we recently had. And I didn't realize that I was actually editing the main page of our software development group, and I deleted everything. And I I didn't know. And then
This is the second I deleted everything story we've got in this conference.
yeah, and we're a global company, so anybody who would want to see that page, it was gone. It was gone.
People?
I don't know who. I don't know who saw that because then I was.
No, but I mean, how big is the company?
We have a few thousand people. Like I don't know, and I was like, oh my god, my name was nowhere, but I knew, and I was like, oh no, and it was totally gone, and I was just like, I just edited one page, and boom, it's just gone. But then they managed to put it back, but they had to do it manually, and I felt really bad, so I will not touch that again. But yeah, sometimes it's very simple. It wasn't even code related. It was just I couldn't revert my changes, and it was just gone.
But I mean, software development, like it's quite a little bit of it is code. Like there's a lot of non-code issues around around software development and just having it work. I want to jump back to something that you talked a little bit about, like hardware, about how it's different. While a software suite, like something that exists in the browser, you can inspect that in many ways, and you get like enormous amounts of feedback about that, and so much debugging help. What's your thinking process as compared to a person who has only worked with software, and you, a person that is familiar with working with hardware that exists outside in the physical realm? How has that changed your thinking process around software? What makes you like? What thinking patterns are different?
I think what I'm doing in hardware that I didn't always used to do in software is you have a lot more of preparation work. That is, you don't touch the code or you don't touch sensors. It's more about thinking about how the pieces are going to fit together, because you have to think in advance. Or okay, I have this idea of something I want to build, but what sensors do I need? What programming language do I want to use?
Yeah, because you have to buy the sensors.
Yeah, also, and it takes time anyway, so you have time to think about the process. And you probably have to think about different ways to build the thing, because one of them is not going to work. I've been breaking problems down into pieces a lot more, because you have to go slowly when you do hardware. You can't just code blindly, because as I said, when it fails, you don't have an error message. You have some error messages, but...
which means that if you have like this big chunk of things that you've been working on, you have no idea which part.
You won't know. Yeah, you won't know if it is a software issue. If it's not compiling, you know that. But if it is not plugged in properly, sometimes you can also burn your microcontroller because you create a short circuit, and you only know because it burns and it smells weird. That's all. That's the only way you know. So I think it's about planning a little bit more. And I think one thing that I really like that I learned from playing with hardware is that I've become a lot more comfortable with failing. Because you do fail a lot, and you understand that it's okay and it's part of the process, and you actually learn a lot more from failing than from succeeding all the time. So now, yes, from failing a few different ways using hardware, I know what not to use, I know which way to go, and it has shaped the way I kind of build my projects now.
Yeah, I think that failure with hardware is also like proper failure, because in software it's kind of like, okay, it doesn't compile, okay, it's like a little bit frustrating, but it's more like playing a computer game in the sense like, I'll just load. And when it comes to hardware, it's more like, I'll just order a new controller now.
Yeah, you have to test if it's not burnt, or if you try to build the whole thing at once and then it doesn't work, you don't know which wire to replug. So you have to go all the way back down. So that's why you have to go slowly and test. Every time you plug in something new, you have to check if it's working and then add, and you have to go a little bit, slowly.
Is there anything that you would like to, before we wrap up, that you would like to remind people of, or something that you would like to broadcast? Basically something that you would like to put on a billboard towards my audience?
All right.
Something that you wish people knew.
I think I wish... to me, it's more about not being scared of experimenting and trying things. I know that most of the time, yes, we are trying to build things that have some kind of value to other people, but to me, that's not the way I learn. I like to create things that might not have a purpose, but there's an awesome amount of things that you learn along the way. And also, especially with hardware, I know it can look scary because you have these microcontrollers and you don't know what they do, but it is really exciting, and it is really, really empowering to see that you you can use the same language to actually make real things move and not only an experience in the browser. And I get like so excited when I get to build something that I really wish people were not scared to try, because the excitement that you get, it's really awesome. And I want more people to feel it. So yeah, that's it.
That's amazing. I really, really like that. Don't be afraid of starting without a purpose, and don't be afraid of like building things outside in the real world. Don't get stuck in the safe software sandbox where we can quick save and quick load.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, in order to follow you and like read up more on you and keep tabs on what you do, what do people do? Where do they find you?
I post most of the stuff I do on Twitter.
All right. What's your Twitter handle?
DevCharlie.
Yep.
Otherwise, I write Medium articles. Like when I build something, I usually post a tutorial so people can do it as well. But usually I share that on Twitter, so I think the main channel is just that.
Thank you so much for coming. This has been so great. It's been a blast.
Thank you.
We're done! That was great!
Thank you.
And that is it. If you're interested in what Charlie does, you can find her at DevCharlie on Twitter. That link is also in the episode description. Also in our episode description is our sponsor. If you feel like brushing up on binary trees and Big O and computer science fundamentals, you should check Brilliant out at brilliant.org/FFF. If you are a first-time viewer, welcome. You have just watched an episode of Fun Function. I release these every Monday morning, 0800 GMT. If you are forgetful, you can subscribe right now by clicking here, or watch another episode right now by clicking here. I am MPJ. Until next Monday morning, stay curious.